All right, here we go. This is Revenue Roadmap, where we talk about sales and marketing for local entrepreneurs. So I am Anthony Karls, president of Rocket Clicks, and I got Mr. James Patterson again with us today. So last time we talked, James, we talked about measurement and tracking. So we want to kind of build off of that from our last conversation and kind of get into how we leverage that to buy data and do market research. But before we get into that, if you could tell our audience again just a little bit about yourself, what you do here at Rocket Clicks, what your background looks like, so you can have a little street cred before you start.
Yeah, absolutely. So, thanks for the intro, Tony. My name's James. Kind of got my start in digital marketing back in 2017. Worked for a little small R&D company that was looking to save a few dollars, I think, on their marketing program, and took a gamble on a college kid. Was great for me because I got to really touch everything and got a lot of opportunity to test around and find out what I liked. That ultimately led me to working with a larger corporation here in Wisconsin. Got kind of an accelerated program in terms of what interested me in digital marketing. Did some SEO, but ultimately landed on paid being kind of my preferred avenue within digital marketing. From there, wanted to work with a larger team of kind of, experts in the field who are on the latest and greatest trends of digital marketing and paid specific. So started looking at agencies to work for and ended up here at Rocket Clicks. And so been here since January 2021.
Nice. And what are you doing now here at RC?
Yep. So at Rocket Clicks now, I'm an account manager. So I get the opportunity to work with our B2C local team. And we work with a variety of different local businesses and help them grow and crush their right now 2024 revenue goals. So it's a lot of fun. Get to impact their business both on the SEO side and paid side, and we get to impact even some areas outside of your kind of quote unquote normal digital marketing avenues. We get to look at their sales process, UI, UX, really get to make impact across their entire business. So it's a lot of fun.
Nice. Cool. So like I said, we last time we talked, we talked about measurement and tracking, why it's important. We run into this a lot with our clients. We got to teach them how to think about this, and one of the big reasons why is obviously when we do this, we can track ROI and understand whether or not what we're doing is working. But there's a downstream impact around buying data and going back to market with our learning. So can you talk a little bit about what it means to buy data in paid media? What are the opportunities look like? What does this mean? What does this look like?
Yeah, absolutely. This is one of those concepts within marketing that I think a lot of agencies don't do a good job explaining to clients, and I think a lot of clients, as a result, don't really fully understand. Especially as it looks to getting a really great strategy online, right? Like one of the first things that you need to do is obviously build out those different channels, build out your accounts, things like that. A lot of times when people are doing that, they're expecting kind of instant results, right? Like we're gonna make this be a huge part of our business and we're going to nail it and everything's going to be good and golden. And a lot of times that ends up not being the case. Reason for that is because a lot of times it's just that expectation setting from kind of the beginning. When we look at building out accounts here at Rocket Clicks, we do have principles that we like to kind of abide by, kind of a shared language in terms of what strategies we like to start with. We'll always start with that, but really what we communicate with clients when we're starting out, especially in new channels, is that data that's coming in, we're actually buying that. It's not really spending the money to acquire new customers. That's actually a result of buying that data that we can then learn from. So, a lot of the clients that we work with that have the most success online, it's really those that have bought a lot of data over time and has used that data to ultimately get smarter, and then ultimately, again, as a result, drive more business to them. So it's been really fun, especially working with newer businesses that are still kind of trying to learn what maybe a Google Ads platform looks like and stuff like that, and kind of show them that this is the right way to look at it. And a lot of times it's that patience and kind of understanding that we're really purchasing that data to learn from that ultimately leads to successful strategies long term with them.
Yeah. So there's really two things to take away here. One is like the concept of buying data. That's how we talk about it when we're building out new channels. the byproduct of buying data, if we're doing it right and getting the data, is revenue, right? So, and the more we understand about our data, the better we're going to generate revenue from that. So that's one aspect that you're talking about. That's more of a philosophical approach than a like technically buying data.
Yep.
So like when we're doing that, what are the things that are really important to like actually gaining learnings from taking the approach of like buying data? Revenue is the byproduct, so that we're ROI positive, we're driving results, we're making an impact on the business. Like what do we need to do to make sure we're doing that right? Because like you can buy data and waste a lot of money, or you can buy data and you can actually learn stuff. So like talk a little bit about that.
Yeah, it honestly goes back to a lot of our last episode where it's so critical to have waterfall reporting implemented within your business. I mean, if you can't look at your own business and understand kind of what it takes to go from, a user entering the site to how much, it costs to acquire a lead coming in to ultimately, making it through the kind of opportunity or sales qualified stage to ultimately becoming a customer for your business, it's going to be really hard to go back to those channels and really make an evaluation to see if, in a sense, that data you purchase is going to ultimately lead to revenue, driving revenue long-term for that strategy. So a lot of times what we like to do is we'll actually start again with that waterfall reporting, getting the sales data. So
what does waterfall reporting mean? Because that's a term we use internally. That's not
for those of you who aren't internal. Leads. So when we talk about waterfall reporting, it's really basically thinking about, in some ways, basically starting from the top of the funnel. So like users engaging with your site and ultimately coming all the way down. What is that trickle down effect? So what you can do by that is by getting business metrics like your leads, opportunities, or a lot of times, again, will be kind of considered sales qualified leads. So basically somebody that came in through your intake team, ultimately talked to maybe a sales member or something like that, and actually gone through the kind of qualification process to understand that they are a good fit for your service. So driving those folks and getting that metric, and then ultimately customers. So people that went from that sales qualified position to ultimately doing business with you, and then the revenue that comes from those customers. By having all of those inputs, you can then kind of build what we like to refer to as the waterfall, which again shows this kind of trickle down effect. What the beauty is there is that you can back up into all these different numbers, right? So if you know now, the average revenue you drove over the last, 2 to 3 years, we can segment that by then month. We can segment that by then each individual sale that comes in. So what's your average customer value? Bring that down to your average qualified sales qualified lead, your average value for a lead, and so on and so forth. So you can actually see kind of how it all fits together and ultimately make sure that you're evaluating platforms the right way.
So how do I start thinking about doing that? Like, what do I need to do to actually track that stuff? Because this is some of the stuff that we actually run into as issues that would be helpful to drive better growth over the long term if we actually were capturing these different data points. So like, what do those look like? What's important to make sure we get, and like in what portion of the waterfall should we get them, and how does that tie back into like, buying data by testing new channels, or literally buying data by going to data platforms and purchasing things?
So the best place to pull those kind of metrics and to share it with your agency partner or whoever is managing kind of your digital marketing strategy is to go right into your CRM. So like a lot of times, depending on what system you're using, you can pull different views and reports, as you should know. So, like we said, we usually like to say about 2 to 3 years is best. It's kind of a side tangent on that, is a lot of times people want to make decisions off of very short periods of window, very short period of time. So it goes back to the data, purchasing data and making decisions off of that. We don't want to make any decisions based off of just a small, portion of time. We want to look big picture. So it goes the same for the waterfall reporting. We want to look at 2 to 3 years, pull in leads, sales qualified leads, customers, and revenue right out of your CRM. Of course, some businesses will have multiple systems, but basically that, for a lot of businesses, you're going to be able to pull that right out of your CRM.
Yeah. So what are the data points that we need to be capturing in our CRM so that we know what we're doing as well?
Yeah, so I mean, it's going to vary depending on your business type, but to give it as broadly as possible, every meaningful step within that process. So what I mean by that is like you're obviously going to have an intro step, right? Somebody's coming in, ultimately they made contact with you on your site, or maybe they saw your phone number on a map listing, something like that. Obviously, a lead makes contact with your intake team or automatically gets entered if they come in through a form. Capturing that step, I think, is one of the most important ones. And then, of course, you're probably other even more so important one would be then actually the customers coming in, because everything along the line, right? There's all these little little conversions that happen throughout. So usually, what the way we like to look at it is that we're going to need leads. So again, how they're coming in. Usually, we're going to call it a marketing qualified lead. Of course, it's going to be a little bit different. So like if you're a law firm, that's usually going to be like an eval, right? So somebody made contact with, again, an intake member. They're saying, hey, I'm interested in this. And I want a personal injury. Well, we don't do personal injury. So then they're out. Like we want to capture those types of things to make sure that, again, when we're buying data on the front end, we can say, hey, look, the leads that we're driving through this data purchase, through these different strategies that we're implementing, we're getting more of not that and more of people making their way all the way through. So it's that marketing qualified lead, and then sales qualified lead, like I've talked about. A lot of times that's then making contact with the sales team member, and then, like I said, ultimately, do they become a customer from there? Every business is going to vary a little bit about what's in the middle there, but ultimately, it's at least those 4 steps or some combination of that. And again, it's very critical because a lot of times you can learn a lot in those in-between phases, although, obviously net new leads and net new customers is often, the ones you hear the most about.
So if we're capturing, name and email and phone number and address, and we're tracking this all the way through, what can we then do with that data once we have a significant data set? Like what's possible there?
Yeah, so one of the coolest things that you can do once you start to accrue some of that data is really refine your prospecting strategies, right? Like there is no better data source to show what does my customer actually look like than your customers, right? So like that is the most purest form of data that exists out there. Obviously, Google's changed their tune in terms of depreciating cookies and things like that, but first party data is always going to be the true premium. And you've already established that. So pulling data sets out of your CRM, like, you mentioned, usually it's going to be some combination of first name, last name, email, phone, address can be applicable to in some of these. You can actually go to other platforms and learn about your customers. One of the ones that we use is working with Experian. They offer this. So basically matching your customer records to credit card data. And they'll actually build out basically a profile on what the different groups kind of come out of your data from your customers. And it can be so impactful, right? So a lot of times when you're making decisions about how to prospect to people who you think, right, kind of make up your target audience, well, you can take the thinking out of it because now you're getting some really hard facts, right? I don't think the credit card companies have any data that they have the absolute monopoly on that stuff, and it can be really, really powerful to, again, take the guesswork out of it. So, one thing that you could do then is you get the report back. In some of the programmatic platforms, you can actually target those specific profiles. So you go from learning about all of the kind of makeup, what does the profile kind of look like from a demographic or behavior, lifestyle, psychographics, things like that. That can be great for kind of like building, kind of a group of those different targeting settings in other platforms. In some platforms, you can actually target that specific Experian profile. So it can be really impactful because, I think probably the most wasted spend that goes out in marketing, right, is guessing of who you think your customer is. Yeah. This takes it out of that. Now you get to say, no, I'm going to target basically exactly who my customers are, who aren't currently my customers. So it's a really powerful tool to utilize that. I think a lot of businesses, unfortunately, overlook how much value they have in all of that historical data that they accrue from building up their business over time.
Yeah. So at its simplest point, if we're starting a business, starting in, like at least for the B2C local team that we run, where that's very targeted on professional services, we're very likely to start in Google. We're going to start buying data through organic search and paid search and start capturing all of that in our CRM. And ideally, like we're being very detailed about what we're capturing, so that in, call it 2 years after doing this and like refining it and getting better and optimizing that, we can then take that and like learn even more. And then we can go to the top of the funnel where it's cheaper and leverage some very cool tactics because, like you said, like you get psychographic and demographic information that impacts messaging, it impacts images, it impacts how you think about delivering assets to those customers or potential clients, and it's all backed by credit card data now, and it's no longer a guess. It's like, oh, I think they look like this.
Yep. Yeah, a lot of guessing in the industry for sure, and you bring up a really powerful point too as it relates to creative, right? So as a lot of businesses guess who they think are probably their typical audience, if you will, well then you're also guessing in your creative and your messaging, and probably impacts other areas of your kind of overall marketing strategy that you can refine based off that data you get back.
Yeah. And when we talk about going to these different platforms, now that we're like, we've purchased a bunch of data on the front end, we've now done some market research. What are some of the delivery options that we have in terms of assets, like using this? Because we're not talking search anymore when we're talking about this. We're talking other asset types with very specific audiences. Like what do those look like?
Yeah, so generally in terms of like really executing on that data, it's going to be DSPs. So it's going to be programmatic advertising. So a lot of times that's going to be display ads. So everybody sees these all the time. If you're not in the advertising industry, you may not have realized it, but display ads are just essentially image ads of different sizes that then you can optimize for different placements. So tablet, desktop, mobile, native, which is another similar form to display, except there's no image. So a lot of times these look like search ads on websites, so outside of the search results page. And then you also have other forms of video media, so OTT, CTV, pre-roll, which those are, the videos. If you've ever been on a news site or ESPN, you start a video, you think you're starting a video about, Aaron Rodgers on the Jets, then all of a sudden an advertisement starts before it goes. You can get all those placements. And again, because you've gotten this really great data set for, really based off your customers, like you can make sure you're getting those placements on the right websites that are really relevant to your, audience. So it's really powerful that way.
Yeah. And you'd be doing that instead of going to your local ESPN dealer and saying, all right, I gotta drop 15K and hope that this does something.
Yeah, and to keep bringing it back, and I hope my customers use ESPN, right? It takes out all that guesswork. What's really cool with some of the DSPs too, you can kind of work with them and make it more audience-based inventory model. So it's going to go after that audience specifically. It's not going to you're not necessarily going to have to select what inventory you want. Base it off where the audience goes. Maybe you thought everybody is on ESPN, but really they're watching a lot of videos on Food Network, right? Like if you went all in on ESPN, you'd be missing out on a big opportunity there. So it's really great for that. And like I said, I think I think every business, right, wants to strike that good balance between marketing spend and obviously the return that comes from it. Doing things like this, tapping into your customer list to then understand who they really are through a service like Experian is really going to drive a lot of benefit for you to ultimately cut down on wasted marketing spend.
Yeah. When you talk about that, how do when we go to market with these different platforms, we like to build these waterfalls first. Can you talk a little bit about the why and how attribution, why we do that, and how attribution is reliable or unreliable in this circumstance?
Yeah, so I think when it comes to measurement, right, there's no business that you'll work with that's not going to ask you, well, how do I know if my ads are doing well and stuff like that, right? So, there's obviously metrics in the platform that can give you directional evidence in terms of, are things, going well or not, right? So it's not to say that there's no value in paying attention to those metrics, but the reason why we start with the waterfall is ultimately, although we do want to make sure that our channels are doing the right things, right? Finding ways to measure strategies, ultimately the waterfall is going to tell us exactly if we're doing the right things. So starting there and understanding that marketing isn't these little siloed channels, it's really this, overarching holistic strategy that all impacts each other. There's no platform that can say 9 out of 10 times, that, paid specifically drove this. A lot of what you find is modeled. Like if you go into a lot of the resources and stuff, a lot of these different platforms are modeling a lot of that data anyways. So having the waterfall to really be your,
So when you say modeled, what does that mean?
yeah. So basically, what they're doing is using AI and machine learning to basically say, based off of historical data in your account, we know on average it takes this many clicks or ad interactions to lead to a conversion. So some of the platforms will actually take those kind of historical data points to say, well, I'm going to count a conversion for them. So one way you can fight against this modeling, right, that I think a lot of people aren't necessarily always privy to, is use offline conversion importing, which can be incredibly powerful to pull it back. And it's still not going to be 100%, right? Like the reality is there's a lot of touch points to any given great customer that comes into your business, right? Especially, there's few services out there, right, that where you're the only one that offers it. Like, there's often competition. There's a lot of different things and different noise and distractions out there. Having a really good marketing strategy that is kind of covering all bases there can help you really look at the waterfall and say, hey, when I have, maybe a specific channel like Bing, which maybe doesn't look like it's doing very well in auction and enabled, we actually see a lower cost per lead. But the platform itself might show you that maybe this isn't the right platform for me. So being really intentional there about like what data you're bringing back to the platforms is first and foremost really important. But having that waterfall there to like really show you, like when we turn things on and off, like what impact does it have actually on the business? That should ultimately be the main area that you're using to really measure and evaluate, is this marketing tactic working or not?
Yeah. So in practical terms, having the waterfall and then going from, all right, currently our strategy is we got paid search and we're running some LSAs and we got some map stuff going and we got organic search. And we're going to introduce programmatic based on all our data because we've started capturing this stuff. Well, we're going to watch the waterfall and what happens. Like, do we keep the ROI that we're targeting? Is our metrics going up? Is the spend that we're making in this platform actually working? We're going to measure. We're going to like look for signals in the platform. But what we actually care most about is like what happened with this waterfall.
Yep. Yeah, absolutely. And generally as an agency, what we like to do is we'll have kind of two forms of this, right? Like we'll have the waterfall itself, and then we'll have an executive dashboard. So like that goes more into like we run media ourselves as an agency. Like we understand you do need to have some gauge on like, is this channel doing what we want it to do? It's just being very intentional to the fact that those metrics that we see in platform aren't always going to be super accurate, knowing it's modeled, knowing it's not seeing the full picture, that somebody actually, saw your organic listing the other day, and that's really what spurred all of their investigation into your brand. The waterfall ultimately is going to let you know, if to your example, if you launch something brand new and all of a sudden you're starting to see more leads come in, and maybe it's, coming in through something like indirect or unknown in Google Analytics, right? You may not really know where it's coming from. Well, then it doesn't matter because you have the waterfall reporting there to really tell you and let you know 100%, like, is this making the positive impact that we expect?
Yeah. Awesome. Well, appreciate it, James. Dropping a little wisdom here. So look forward to our next combo. But big picture, what we talked about today. If you're going to market and you're investing in your marketing, and you should use that word. You're buying data, you're learning from data, so you can build the empire you want to, and like really continue learning, and doing it well has long-term results. Compound those effects. So appreciate it, sir.
Yeah, thanks, Tony.